mentioned is a calendar. So the availability. And I'll show you, we have agreed on the calendar with most of the companies. I have to, because if you're running on 10 companies or 15 companies, so the calendar of what's happening in terms of board meetings over the next 12 months is something that you will document, you will agree, and you abide. The second one, which is quite critical, is the board pack. And I will show you at the end of the session, I will show you an example of a real board pack. And this is when Ziad, not this Ziad, the other Ziad started, he had no board pack. I sat down with him, we did this thing, now Ziad has a proper board pack. And I'll show you an example of a board that we sat down, which had no board pack, had no board agenda, had no board templates, and now they have it. This is the easiest one. But once you have it, you have your board pack, then the quality of the discussions become much more relevant because you are well prepared, you have good data, and then you could take decisions quite quickly, provided the board pack reaches at least 10 days before the board meeting. So all these points are critical, and this is the whole topic of it, because you will end up having these templates that you could use to help you come up with valuable board pack, with calendars that make sense, with agendas that make sense. So I'll come back to this point. Okay, so this is the... Okay, let me go back. I'm going to go through a bit the theory, and then I'm going to show you the practices. Okay, identifying. So how we have the list. We know what we want. We know how we're going to pay them. We have agreed on this. How do I go about finding them? How do you find them? Jad, how do you find them? Okay, so one is connections. So you have connections, you know people. So connections is one. What else? Where would you get these people? Okay, you could have headhunters. So you could have people who knows, you have headhunters who would know what it is, and some of them will get paid. Of course, they would get paid, and they will get you the right board members. But in startups, it's difficult. So what else? Thank you, Lina. It's all right. No, but what you have people that sits on boards, and then they know, and there's not too many. So these people would do, so there's a number of the mentors, a number of the coaches that we have are people who have experience sitting on boards of different companies. So this could be one. What else? What? Okay, so in case you need an academic approach behind it, a number of the professors would love to. One of the reasons why I'm conducting this training, we're doing this training together with other training to the teachers, to the professors at USG across different faculty, is for them to be able to sit on the board. So for them it is important because it would complement the academic know-how by having real-life application of it. So universities are keenly interested to be sitting on board. Founders of companies are not that keenly interested in getting academic because they don't want academic. They could open in the book. They want somebody, you don't listen to Ziad. He wanted somebody who has been through it, who had lived through it, and who could get it. This is what he wants. ما بده حدا يقول له كيف بيشتري الكتاب وبيعرف كيف. But now professors are realizing it, and the rector at the realize this is important. It's something that he wants to implement. So you see more academics that see that for them to be good academics, they need to complement this with some living experiences. So you're right. So universities could be one. I'm sorry? Okay, business angels, investors, typically what you will do is somebody who invests is definitely going to take a board seat. They will not put money without having a board seat. So how many of those? You have about 15 of those: venture capital, business angel, private equity companies, and I could give you the list. We have 50 of those across the region. We have the contact details, so this is a good side of getting. And they won't charge because they are investing in your company and they want to make sure. So investors, business angel is one source. Universities is another source. Your network is another source. Headhunter is another source, yes? I'm sorry? Okay, you could have social media. You could have, yes?
You can search for the business partners in other companies.
In other companies. So what you do is you say, for instance, Ziad will be keenly interested to sit on board of a different company because he would learn on how to be board members, and hopefully he will contribute from the experience that he has. So CEOs of existing companies who are major shareholders are also potential, and he would love it. I know that he will be. Now my role as a shareholder is I don't want him to start sitting on the board of 5 or 10 companies, but and he has already a whole list of things to do, so we will try to minimize this thing. When I was at HP, we were encouraged to go and sit on boards of companies. I was 35-year-old or 40-year-old. They started because it's an excellent training ground for this. In El Rey, when I was there, I was de facto sitting on the board of about 20 companies, but within the group. They were in completely different sectors, but you have to sit in on these companies. So you have different ways of looking at it. So you have trusted mentors. He mentioned, yes.
Is there also decision whether
Okay. Now, I mentioned this in terms of geographical area. Say, for instance, Jad wants to open in the UAE. He wants to expand. Now, if he has somebody that is in the same field sitting on a UAE company that has already the connection, for him, it might be somebody that is interested. So the nationality plays an important role in this case. It could be the gender. You have a number of boards today where they say, you know, it's important. Why? Because gender brings diversity. Because the way, I mean, even in terms of, Lina is sitting on so the chemistry when women decide on how to, is very different when it's a mixed environment. So what you do is having this diversity brings a more different perspective to a problem, where if it was all man versus all women, it could be the same problem, even bigger problem when it's all women together versus all men. So you need to have the diversity together. So we have trusted mentors. He mentioned what was important for him, mentor and coaches. These could be good boards. Typically what I worked with Stanford, what I did, and Raja would experience the same thing, is I worked purely as a coach. I was not board, there was no board existing. We got the coaching relationship going. They built the trust. They understood how I work, understood the team behind it. And then they said, after the 1 year, Stanford said, it's over. So you cut, this is the agreement, it's 1 year. Then what they do is they retain you. But they won't retain you as a coach, they retain you as a board director. So coaches and mentors are great ways to come and become board members. And ultimately what happens is that I started as a coach. I became a board member. I ended up investing in these companies. So I have a portfolio of companies where I put my own money behind, and I even stretched Stanford because I was the first one to be at the same time on the board, at the same time a coach, and at the same time investment, and in their contract it didn't exist. So they had to redesign the contract. Every time Constantin was taking a decision, I was stretching the box, on this. But this allowed them to have better quality and better regulation that you have. So a local business leader. So where do you get them? Chambers of Commerce. They will know that we have. Retired industry executive. You have a number of them. A number of retired executive living here and living abroad. And you have different associations. And these people would love. A number of you would have number of people that are in their 60s, mabsutin, andon al-masari, but they're not really contributing. So what you do is you have, and I know that a number of you knows of these people that are existing, and they would love to come, wabidun masari, landun masari, but they would love to make a difference to this world and love to keep their grey cells active on it. Former industry regulators, this is in case. Referral from current BODs, so normally a chairman has his own contact, a network of friends you've mentioned, customers, key suppliers will tell you, this is a good one to have. Trade association, so this is Chamber of Commerce, Chamber of Industry, you have different. Headhunting that was mentioned by Rula, shareholders might have their own, and then we put family members and we erase family members. So we do not want family members on the board. We're trying, because they're overwhelmingly present. Look, if your business is in the government sector, definitely you will need somebody from government to be present. Now, as Stanford, we don't want, because the countries that we're operating with, we know how they operate, so we said no. So we said if the company had any dealings with the government, it was a no from our side. They will not be allowed to apply to Stanford Seed in this case. So, but if you are, and you deal with government, in other countries, clearly you need to have somebody, or if your business is regulated, telecom, health, that are regulated, you need to have somebody from either the government or the regulatory entity on it, because you don't know what is happening. And this could be a huge risk areas if you don't have this expertise. So I would say definitely government, regulatory bodies that are here, municipalities. If your larger customer, one of the companies was waste management, the number one customers are the municipalities. They tested, they won this, it's called the Omni Processor. So this is the Gates Foundation created. It's a $2 million box, it's a container. These containers take all sorts of waste and produce water, fertilizers, and what? Water, what do you think it would produce? It's a box, it's a big container shape. It takes all sorts of waste. It's actually not to fight electricity. So it does electricity, fertilizer, and water behind it. You put it in here, so they got it as, now who are their customers? Municipalities. So in case you want to get into municipalities, you need to have somebody from your municipality. So they went in and got the Ministry of Waste on board that represent all the different, so in some cases you have to get somebody, so I'm completely open. Now from a Stanford perspective, for us it was a no-no. So it's, but you have to adapt to the country. Okay, so what do you do in the recruitments? Once we identified, very important to do background checks. Very important. The same way when you interview for candidates for CEO, I mean, a board member is very important because the last thing you want is your board member to have some sort of skeleton in his cupboard. So once I don't know, I'll use Lina. Once Lina would decide maybe Lina is a wrong example, but we'll look at Jad. So when Jad decided when he wants to, he got to know his partner because he has another partner that is here. He wanted to check. I mean, this partner is well known. He was a cook. He was on TV. So he checked on him. He checked on his track record. He checked on his, what worked, what didn't work in any relationship, business relationship or personal relationship. The first thing that somebody would do when you get involved with someone is you want to know what happened in the past. Why did it work? Why didn't it work? And I would focus on why it did not work and trying to understand this so as to be able to set. So this reference check is very important. The interviews that you conduct in terms of values, ethics, in terms of fit with the culture. So if it doesn't fit with the culture, it will not work. And your culture is very specific behind it. Well-connected, objective. So these are all the different elements that you have raised. Do they have the time? Availability was mentioned. Do they have the track record? Okay, so these are the points. So you go through this recruitment process. You will have the candidates. You'll have your attributes. And then you will grade. And you will see who comes up best. Don't do it alone. Have other people advise you. So this is quite important in terms of recruiting. He told you, Ziad told you how important it is in terms of getting the right quality board. Okay. What are the responsibilities? We've mentioned establish the vision, the mission, and the values. This is very important. Set the strategy and the structure of the company. Delegate to management. What can we do as a board? What do you do as a CEO? This split is very important. And you need to make it clear. If it's not clear, it leads to confusion. It leads to confusion. You're going to have problem in the organization. So it's very important that we know what we delegate and to whom do we delegate and to what extent do we delegate. And this is called delegation of authorities, and I will be happy to share. Exercise accountability to shareholders, be responsible to relevant state. So this is clear. Risk and crisis management. In every 2 board meetings, or twice a year, this session is very important. What are the key risks? How important are these risks? What is our contingency plan behind it? And what are we going to do about it? This is the role of a board to do. Corporate ethics is important. They are the one who are holding the stick, deciding whether it's right or whether it's wrong. We have monitoring company performance is obvious, looking at what's happening, why it worked, why it didn't work, why are we below in terms of revenue or margins. Transformational transaction. It could be a merger. It could be an acquisition. It could be a partnership. This is quite important. And of course, management evaluation and compensation. Who decides on the CEO? Ziad is the major shareholder. He doesn't decide on his salary. He's not happy with his salary. He doesn't decide. So we had a major problem. So how did we fix the problem with Ziad? So when you have a problem, you're on the board. And he believes that he's worth most. How do you fix it? Benefits. Okay, you could do it through benefits. Okay, you could have incentive, but how do you do it to make sure that it's fair? How would you do it's fair?
If he's hired from another company, how much?
Okay, so what you do is benchmarking. So benchmarking is the way you look at it, and we did this. So because we have funded about 100 companies over the past, so we have the track record of how much salaries we have across this. So we know what is a CEO, we know what is a head of sales, we know what is a senior programmer, a junior programmer, a project manager. This data is available behind it, and we use this data to be able to benchmark. And we say, look, according to the benchmark, this is the range for a CEO. So behind it, so then he accepts it. Then the second part is what? This is the base salary. The second part is his bonus. Because the bonus of a CEO could be 2 times, could be 3 times his salary. So how do you go? Again, you benchmark and you see what it makes available behind it. I'm sorry?
Monthly. 2 times or 3 times the salary?
No, it could be annual. It could be annual. So for some of those, it could be annual. But then what you do, if the compensation is the high, you tend to lower the base. You lower the base, and a number of companies, with Ziad, we said, with other companies, we cannot afford $200,000 because we're looking now. We're looking for a chief executive operating officer. It's about $200,000 for his size of companies. For this, it's difficult to afford. So what we say is we pay maybe $100,000 or $150,000, but we give him a much higher variable point. You do this revenue or this profit, then we give you once or twice your salary. Normally, it is 6 months for a CEO to 12 months maximum. But for startups, it could be multiplied by 2 or multiplied by 3, depending. Again, benchmarking is important. Okay, so we have this. So this takes time. And I will show you an example how we do a benchmarking on it. Is this clear? Responsibilities, they're clear. We think we mentioned those. Adisse Amakon?
What about this?
يلا now when people start yawning إنه بلشنا بالphase إنه I'm going to show you okay practical the board size we've mentioned too small is not going to work you don't have enough perspective too high it's become a chaos so this is quite important that we have larger with broader skills working versus prestige you might get some prestigious name بس ما بيعملوا شيء بس اسمهم هون موجودين بس ما بيفتحوا كل تمهم ما بيعملوا شيء but so it's up to you to decide what you want people that work or people that are here because of their name so you need to always leave room from private equity because you will have at one point in time private equity don't try to fill it too much because you might have one you might have two in his case he had three he started with Beritech, he had Cedar Mundi, and now he's getting another. So he had three, and each one are going to ask for a board seat. So if you have too many filled, you have already 5 or 7, you find yourself when you have 2 or 3 or 4 rounds, every single round you will get a new board member. So leave room for private equity venture capital.
But some companies are funded hundreds of VCs on board.
Yeah,
let's say in our case, Karim, let's say.
I agree. They have, so what you do is not all shareholders have. So normally you need to have a minimum stake. You need to have, I don't know, 15% to have allowed to a board seat. لأنه if you want كل الواحد عنده 1% بده seat ما راح تخلص العملية. So you know you have a minimum number of shares that you need. Retain at least one member who has been directly responsible for raising capital. This is important. You need to have one, especially in most of your cases. If you don't have somebody who has raised capital before and who don't, you need to have someone on board. And finding these persons, it's easy to raise capital. What is more difficult is to exit from it. So this is one of the things you don't have. Another of our, Rami knows him, is Sami Beidoun. With Sami, we started the Beritech Fund 1. This is the first fund, VC fund that started 10 years ago. So we have this. Now we are exiting. الشطارة مش in funding, مش in providing grant or providing equity. شطارة is to be able to exit and to go back to your investors. هذا مسؤوليتكم, and on top of this, I'm giving you 6%, 8%, 10%. So you want somebody who not only invested, but actually have exited from the investment. This is the best that you could get. In Lebanon, unfortunately, we have very few who have exited, very few. So we have, لا بلشنا جديد يعني صرنا so we have the so this is so retain at least evaluate your board and directors on a regular basis and take necessary actions. And I will show you examples of what a template is for evaluation. So this is other practical consideration for board. So this is important as practical consideration. What is the board structure? You need to define the role of the chairman. All this is in the board charter. Annual calendar and agenda. I will show you examples. You might have committees. You know, normally you always start with audit, or you could have audit, finance, and risk, and I will show you what they do. You might have for bigger one, HR and compensation or investment. So depending on these companies, you might have no committee. When you start with audit and finance and risk, and then you might have others. And compensation that we have discussed, how do you manage it? Because you don't want to pay too much, either through cash or through this. You have benchmark, you have data available, and this we could help. So this is important in terms of the structure. So let me give you, this is for instance for Al Ghurair. It's a much larger organization, but I'll share it to you because ultimately the companies will go. So what we have done, we separated. We separated the families and we separated the business. This was the first thing that I've implemented. We said, this is your family. You will have your family council. You have a shareholder committee. You have a shareholder assembly. So this is family governance, family structure, and we'll help you put it together. But don't get involved on the business side. It's the first big decision that you have to implement. Once you've done this, you have a board. We set up a board. Under the board, we set up independent, non-family versus family members behind it. We had an advisory committee. So in this case, we decided that the board, we had certain expertise that we have, and the advisory committee was on certain specialty. They were in real estate, in food, in construction, etc. that you have. And then we had the corporate center, and then we have the different entities. So what we did is we had a pretty clear governance between family versus business. We had a board charter, and we had also a family convention. And a lot of time is spent on the family convention because in most of the companies in the Middle East, these families end up splitting because they don't agree after the second or the third generation. First generation, father, sons, daughter, no problem. Second generation, we get to the cousins, it becomes start shake. Third generation, there is no more alignment. So if you don't have a clear convention, the same way you have a board charter, and if this fails, this will fail. Because then people will say, I want out. You know, you have a number of families, when family members, even after second generation, they said, it's not working. I'm not getting along with my cousins. We don't decide the same way. I'm not interested. I'm backing out. Now, you have a lot of pressure. I have somebody in this room who had gone through it. She said, I want to have peace of mind. I'm going to withdraw. I don't want to have discussion every time investments are being made. I take my due, even if it's subsidized. Even if I'm selling my shares well below market value, I want to have the peace of mind. The problem when you do this is you lose synergies. Is that what you do, if everybody does this, never you have a chance for a group to become a big group. And unfortunately, it is happening, and this is a logic that a board needs to protect. Okay, so this is one way. What is I will send it to you. I don't want to go into the details, but on one page, you put the charter. What is the objective of the board? What is the authority and responsibility of the board? From financial oversight, capital management, corporate governance. I know I'm going quickly because these are templates. You will have these templates. You want to use them. You come back to me. We'll discuss it. You have the composition, chairman, 3 family members, 4 independent non-executive members. Modus, how often the lifespan, is it 3 years, is it more? Decision making, what are the type of decisions, and what is the frequency, 4 times a year. On one chart, you have everything that you need in terms of the mandate of it. This we have gone through, very important slide to find it. Take the time to reflect. It's like when you set in a new relationship, take the time to reflect. What are the values that are important to you? And this is it, because if not, in a year or 2 years or 3 years, we have selected the wrong. And it's the same thing when you're going to get a private equity or a venture capital. If you don't have this and you haven't thought of, the worst thing it could have is, and here you have, and when you're married, you could have a divorce. With a shareholder that is involved, it's very difficult to get a divorce because these agreements could be over a long period of time. So it's very important that you take your time, do your due diligence, get to know the person, go through this before you make a decision. Okay, this is a calendar. For each of the companies, we will have the board meeting in red. We will have the board papers, and I will show you an example of board papers that you have. What is the stack being up? So, and this you have it. So imagine when you have 10 companies, this agenda becomes filled very quickly. So typically, the board papers are sent 2 weeks before the board meetings. When you have a committee, the committee is typically 1 week before the board meetings. So it fills very quickly for one company. So this is the board. This is the agenda. The agenda will carry different topics. It could carry, I don't want to go against in the details, dividend policy. How much of the profit of the company we give back to the shareholders. This is very sensitive. Very sensitive. Shareholders need to have, I mean, in Al Ghurair, you have a number of family members behind it. Each of the family members relied on the policy, on the dividend policy to be able to fund it. So you need to have a minimum to ensure that all the family members have enough money, but at the same time, you need to ensure that you have enough money going back to the company. How much do you give back to shareholders? How much do you keep in the company is something that is a balancing act that you need to do. So this is very sensitive. Once a year, you define it. And this you don't change from one year to the other. If you change it, the message to the investors, these guys don't know what they're talking about. One day it's 80%, the other day it's 0, then it moves to 50%. This is the dividend policy. If you change it too often, it sends the message that you don't own and shape your own destiny. Annual financial management review, this is very important. This is when you review the financials, audited financials. The auditor comes to the board and presents. This is very important. You ask questions to the auditors. The head of finance, Salameh, would leave the room on it. How do you think? Do we have the right CFO? Does he have the right structure, system, process? Does he have the right team? What are the sort that we have to do? So this is a discussion that the board engage when the CFO is out that we have, and then we have to approve it. Investments. Whatever investment we make, we review these investments. It could be on a semi-annual basis or an annual basis. You have liquidity. What is our cash flow situation? Every board meeting, we look at the cash flow, not only today, but the forecast for the next 6 to 12 months. If Jad knows, with Jad we sat down, but this is how much I get. How much would it last? This is how much it will last, Constantin. Do we have 6 months or do we have 9 months? We go through the cash flow. You have only 6 months. How can we stretch it to 9 months, Jad? What can we cut in terms of cost? So all these discussions are discussions that you're going to have at the board level. So you need to have, this is very important decisions that you have. Compensation of the CEO of this. This compensation is also discussed once a year. So you have different, and for each of these boxes, we have templates. And these templates, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and I will show you some of these templates. Okay, so this is the, this is the different agenda items, dividends, strategic intent, a capital allocation, and for each one of them you have an owner. For each you have an objective, and for each we have a template. We wanted somebody experienced in strategy. We wanted somebody to head our audit committee, and we wanted somebody with us, because we had a number of legal cases. We had more than 100 legal cases. We wanted to make sure that we have it. So we decided this is what we want. This is the specialty. This is the rationale. This is the possible background. And based on this, we sent this to the headhunter. The headhunters align it. We have our own contact, and we went and we hired along these. Hi, Munir. You good, Munir? So you're ready to talk, Munir?
If I'm asked to.
You asked to. Okay, so this, for instance, when it fills, this is for one company. You have the board meeting in red. You have the pack here. You have an executive committee coming up on to complement it. So it could fill up very quickly depending on the level of complexity that you have. But in your cases, it's at least once every 2 months that you will have it. And normally you should have a board pack before it. And in case you have an audit committee, if you have, for instance, Technica will definitely have an audit committee, will definitely have probably an executive committee behind it. Okay, so what you have here, this is the XCOM paper due, this is the meeting, this is the board due, and this is the board meeting. Okay, so this is, if you want, the other thing, always get an external view. Don't focus only on internal matters. You know, what is happening to competition? What are the trends taking place? If you only focus on internal matters, you will die as an organization. So this is always important to get some external, it could be a customer speaking, it could be a partner speaking, it could be information on a competitor that is happening. This is important to have it. We mentioned dividend policies, we mentioned, what else can I mention here? The liquidity situation, the cash flow, and every single one. You live or you die by the quality of your cash flow forecast. If you have it wrong, the company could be in big surprises. And a number of you here understand what I mean. Compensation once a year, and then we have the business reviews on a quarterly basis. We evaluate the performance of the CEO at the end of the year. We also decide how much compensation. We approve the budget. We set the budget in here. So all of these boxes is one discussion item that we have in board.